Should the Rangers consider a reunion with former captain Ryan McDonagh? We debate.
You're Locked on the New York Rangers, your daily podcast on the New York Rangers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, Blue Shirts fans, to episode number 1315 of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. I'm your host, John Chick. Just want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube, and we are, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So wanted to go ahead and spend today's episode on something that's become something of a hot button topic among Ranger fans. There's some chatter about this on social media, even in the YouTube comment section for this very podcast. There have been a couple of you guys that have at least mentioned this, and that's the idea of a reunion between the New York Rangers and their former captain, Ryan McDonagh. So basically, this is the Ryan McDonagh show. We're going to go through all the reasons why this could make sense, all the reasons why this may not make sense. And at the end, I'm going to have some final thoughts and ultimately a verdict on whether or not I think this is a good idea and whether or not I think that this is actually a, realistic option. To begin with, obviously, we could have some new Ranger fans. There might be some people that are new to the sport of hockey, some younger fans that weren't really following the Rangers all that closely during McDonagh's first go around with the Rangers. But if you need the Cliff Notes, 8 years with the Rangers, the last 4 of which he was the captain of this team. Rangers made it to the Stanley Cup final in 2014 with Ryan McDonagh as a part of the roster. And like I said, today we're basically just going to be giving him a fair trial. But it has been a talking point due in part to a recent article by Peter Baugh of The Athletic. He basically laid out an ideal New York Ranger offseason, some of the moves, some of the wheelings and dealings that they could make within the realm of things that are, possible. We're not talking about trading for the best players in the NHL or whatever the situation might be. Realistic moves that they could potentially make this offseason. One of those ideas that he threw out there was a trade with Tampa Bay that would encompass the Rangers reacquiring Ryan McDonagh. And again, a lot of you guys seem to be on board with this as well. We'll start with the reasons against trading for Ryan McDonagh and against bringing Ryan McDonagh back to the New York Rangers. And then we'll get to the reasons for it. And then, like I said, a verdict at the very end. But to begin with, the first hurdle that the Rangers are going to have when it comes to doing just about anything this offseason is the salary cap and their salary cap constraints. The Rangers are currently projected to have just north of $8 million in salary cap space, $8.42 million to be exact. And Ryan McDonagh is entering the final year of his contract, and he has a cap hit currently of $6.75 million per season. So you can see right out of the gates here, this is already an enormous hurdle that the Rangers are going to have to clear if they want to even entertain the possibility of reuniting with their former captain. There's always a way to clear cap space, but this one in particular, I think would require some serious salary cap gymnastics. And frankly, it gets to a point where even if you are able to clear enough salary cap space where you can barely squeeze in Ryan McDonagh under the cap, I mean, is that really going to be your big move of the offseason? If you clear that much money, is that really what you're going to do to bring back Ryan McDonagh for just 1 year, just 1 year left on his contract? In order to do that, and this is another reason why you can make a pretty strong case against bringing back Ryan McDonagh, you would have to shuffle around a lot of money. I just gave you the numbers. Ryan McDonagh right now would take up just about all of what remains of the Rangers salary cap space going into this offseason. And, to bring him back, you would have to show multiple other current New York Rangers the door. I think for sure, if you're going to fit Ryan McDonagh under the salary cap with the New York Rangers, you're going to have to trade Chris Kreider. Now, granted, that's something that could end up happening anyway. That's arguably something that should end up happening anyway. And I do think we will see a trade of Chris Kreider. As I've mentioned recently, the fact that Mike Sullivan is the new coach, maybe that slightly increases the chances of Kreider being back next season. But even with that being the case, I still expect him to ultimately be dealt. So you'd have to move on from Chris Kreider. You probably also have to trade K'Andre Miller. I can't envision a scenario where the Rangers can afford Ryan McDonagh and then also re-sign K'Andre Miller for however much that's going to be. And keep in mind, him and his camp looking for a significant raise. He does have arbitration rights. there's just no way they can afford both those players, I don't think, unless I'm just completely missing something here, or unless the Rangers are going to do something completely unexpected to free up some salary cap space, namely, trading Panarin, trading Mika, but either one of those seem all that feasible at this time. So that's a lot of maneuvering, again, just to get one more season of Ryan McDonagh. Now, there might be some Ranger fans out there that are listening to this, watching this, whatever it might be, that hear the idea of trading Chris Kreider, that hear the idea of trading K'Andre Miller, and they say, hey, sign me up. I'll take our former captain back on the team if it also results in, moving on from both of those players. But again, if you're going to go through all that trouble where you trade Chris Kreider, partially to free up cap space, and you trade K'Andre Miller, not really to free up cap space because he doesn't have a contract right now, so he's not really on the books, but you would do that partially to not have to pay Miller and spend the money elsewhere. If you go to all that trouble, to those great lengths, again, one season of Ryan McDonagh, that's really the way you're going to go. I'm just not really seeing that. I don't think that's the best road you can go down if you're going to make moves like that. The other hurdle to get around here, or get over, I suppose, is a question that needs to be answered from Tampa Bay's point of view. Why would they do this? Tampa Bay is still trying to win, and I realize they went down in the first round this playoff round here, and they went down fairly easily, lost in 5 games to the Florida Panthers. Panthers are a wrecking ball, though, and that's a very difficult draw in the first round, and obviously Tampa Bay lost. But looking at Tampa Bay, it seems to me that they're still trying to contend with this core group of players that brought them a couple of Stanley Cups in the past and obviously made it to the Stanley Cup final 3 years in a row, again, winning 2 of them. But you look at players on Tampa Bay that are all signed for 3 years or more. It's a lot of household names, a lot of brand names here. Here's the list. Kucherov, Point, Gensel, Hagel, Cirelli, Hedman, Chernak, and Vasilevsky. All of those players that I just mentioned are signed for 3 years or more. And that means they're dug in. They're dug in with this core, and they're going to try to win, at least one more championship there. And that being the case, I just don't see why they would then turn around and trade Ryan McDonagh. And granted, they already did trade him once to Nashville, and then Nashville traded him back this past season, and he's back in Tampa Bay. But now that he's back, I mean, would you really look to move on from him again? He was important to those 2 Stanley Cups that Tampa Bay won, a handful of seasons ago, and I just don't think it really makes a lot of sense to move on from him. Now, the one reason why maybe their hand could be forced a little bit is it does seem like they don't have a lot of cap space. They have even less cap space than the Rangers do going into this next offseason here. $6.96 million projected cap space for the Tampa Bay Lightning, to be exact. So maybe McDonagh becomes a little bit of a cap casualty. The one way that I could see this maybe working, and you'd probably have to get like a draft pick involved if you're the Rangers, which, I mean, they've traded away enough of those recently. You could maybe, and I emphasize maybe here, because again, I don't think this makes a ton of sense from Tampa's perspective. You could try to do a trade around the Rangers acquiring McDonagh and the Lightning acquiring Carson Soucy, because Soucy makes significantly less than McDonagh, about half of what McDonagh makes. And if you're Tampa and you're looking to, save a little bit of money, you could, I guess, take that downgrade there. And if you're the Rangers, you move on from Soucy, you bring back McDonagh, and it's a little bit of a pay increase, but it's only about $3 million more than you were spending anyway. That could work. But I think for that to go through, the Rangers would probably have to kick in a draft pick as well. And I don't know. This just, to me, seems like the theme of this section of the episode here, as far as why not to do this, you would have to go through a lot of trouble to bring back Ryan McDonagh, who, by the way, is going to turn 36 years old next month, and presumably just get one season of him. It just seems like a little too much bending over backwards to make this happen. And that's the last reason I want to mention here before we shift our attention to the reasons for bringing back Ryan McDonagh. McDonagh's age, I mean, it's self-explanatory, but the bottom line, the guy's going to be 36 years old next month. You're always kind of playing with fire whenever somebody gets up to that age. Can they hold it down for another season? Will their game fall off a cliff? You just never know how it's going to go. Different players age in different ways. That guy has blocked a lot of shots in his career, over 2,000 to be exact. He's been part of all these deep playoff runs, first with the Rangers, then with Tampa Bay. I mean, the dude's taken a beating, and he is now getting, almost out of his mid-30s and into his late 30s. So there is some risk there as well for any team that's looking to acquire Ryan McDonagh, or even Tampa Bay themselves, bring him back for one more season this upcoming year. But we'll see. Those are the reasons against it in just a second, because I know there's some Ranger fans that are nostalgic. They really like Ryan McDonagh, count me among you. We're going to go into the reasons why it could actually make some sense, and there could be, some reasons to do this if you're the Rangers. We'll get to that in just a second. All right, we just want to take a minute to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by Wonderful Pistachios. Looking for a snack that is both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you, unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller longer. Personally, I love the no shells variety. It's the perfect grab and go snack when I'm on the run, whether I'm sitting at my desk, on the run, whatever it might be. They're always a great go-to. And if you love cracking open every shell for that satisfying crunch, the in-shell options are always a classic favorite. The satisfying crunch of opening each shell, it is like snack meditation. Get snacking and get cracking with the snack that packs the protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. All right, let's go ahead and keep everything rolling here. On Locked On New York Rangers, got to give a huge shout out to the everydayers, as we always do on Locked On New York Rangers. Going to keep everything rolling in our next episode tomorrow. I'm thinking what I might do is talk a little bit about some other unrestricted free agents from around the league. We haven't really dove into this so much this year. I mean, we talked about Marner a little bit in the last episode. If you want my thoughts on him and him potentially becoming a New York Ranger, you can check out the episode right before this one. But what we're going to do in our next episode, most likely, is look at different UFAs from around the league, guys that could be a fit from the Rangers, guys that I think that maybe they should look to chase in free agency, or maybe certain players that I don't think they should look to chase in free agency. But we'll get to that in the next episode. For right now, let's continue talking about Ryan McDonagh. And of course, now we look at the other side of the coin and we talk about the case for reacquiring Ryan McDonagh via a trade. For starters, this reason is pretty obvious, but I'm going to say it anyway because it's a point that needs to be emphasized over and over and over again, whether it's by me, by any of you guys, by the Rangers themselves. This team needs more leadership. There's nobody that can watch the Ranger team last year, the way they played, the amount of no-shows, the lack of energy, the seeming malaise that this team got into for large chunks of the season. They'd snap out of it every once in a while for a handful of games, but then they go right back into it. There's no way you can look at this team and what they produced last year, the way they played, and certainly their final record, and think that, yeah, leadership is good. Leadership is the strength of this team. There's just no way. And that being the case, Ryan McDonagh seems to be a natural-born leader. He's worn a letter just about anywhere that he's gone. This is somebody that will hold guys accountable and hopefully remind them of just what the hell it means to be a New York Ranger. That's something that's really been lacking these last really just last year, if we're being honest here, but just the lack of drive, the lack of focus, the lack of any sort of attention to detail. Ryan McDonagh seems like the kind of guy that would come in, lay down the law, and let people know that certain things are just going to be unacceptable. Certain styles of play are just going to be unacceptable. Taking nights off is going to be unacceptable. That has to be something that happens next season, whether that's guys that are already on the team, whether that's guys that they bring in via free agency or trade. They need some more leaders in that room, some guys that'll get in your face, kick you in the butt when you need it, and again, hold guys accountable. As I mentioned earlier, he is a former captain of the New York Rangers. The final 4 of his 8 seasons here, he was the captain. And then, he goes to Tampa Bay, gets traded there. He was an alternate captain by the time he got to his second full season with Tampa Bay. So obviously they saw him as leader as well. And then he gets traded to Nashville. He only ends up spending a season and a half there. And if we're being honest, it was mostly a disaster, not just because of Ryan McDonagh, but that is a team that has fallen well short of expectations. But while he was there, he was once again right back to being an alternate captain. And obviously very impressive. A lot of teams look at him, they respect the style of play, and the coaches see what I think a lot of us saw as Ranger fans, that this dude is a leader. They need somebody like that to the New York Rangers. On top of that, speaking of the type of player that the Rangers need, frankly, just straight up, he's a hard-nosed player. Ranger fans are basically starved for a player like this, which I think is why so many Ranger fans, they hear the idea of the Rangers maybe trading for Ryan McDonagh, and they all excited, and oh my God, we got to bring him back. That was our captain. We got to go back to the good old days, right? When this team actually went out there and battled every single night. And, there is something to that for sure. I mentioned this earlier, but I got to throw this stat back out there. 1,010 regular season games for McDonagh, 2,011 block shots. That takes guts, plain and simple. The Rangers need a blue-collar player such as Ryan McDonagh, or at least more of them. And maybe there's a couple of guys in that room right now that fit that description, but they need more of them. Even this past season, at the age of 35, Ryan McDonagh ended up with 152 block shots. That's somebody that's going to go out there and sacrifice the body and set a great example for his team. Another reason why I really like the idea of bringing back Ryan McDonagh, and this reason has like certain little I guess mini categories to it. He's only on a 1-year deal. Now, I mentioned earlier that on one hand, it does seem like you're bending over backwards and going too far if you're going to make all these moves to make enough cap space for Ryan McDonagh and just bring him back at 1 year. But there are some advantages to Ryan McDonagh only having 1 year left on his contract as well. Namely that you could see him as kind of a stopgap defenseman, and it would not prevent the Rangers from spending big in free agency next offseason, which I think is what they're going to do, because by then, McDonagh's contract would have expired anyway. But as far as being a stopgap defenseman, let's start there. I'm beginning to really like the idea, just in general, whether it's McDonagh or anybody else, beginning to really like the idea of the Rangers bringing in a veteran, sure-handed, steady defenseman on a shorter contract, just a year or two. I know there's a lot of people out there, some of you probably listening to this show or watching this show right now, that are looking at, the big name defenseman free agents that are going to be available. Ivan Provorov, Vladislav Gavrikov, those are the two that really come to mind, especially among left-handed defensemen, and they very well might be the two best defensemen available as free agents. The issue I have with the two of them, and I've mentioned this in the past, but I'll repeat it here because, we're going to bring this all the way back to McDonagh here in just a second, is that they're both very good defensemen. They are. But I feel like in a thin class of free agents, they're going to end up getting paid quite a bit more and get quite a bit longer contract than you would probably like. Those two are going to get paid, and it's going to be no joke as far as how long the contract is either. Provorov right now is finishing a 6-year deal that paid him $6.75 million a season. He's still just 28. Gavrikov is finishing a 2-year deal that pays him $5.875 million a year. He's still just 29. Those two are going to get paid. So I'm kind of in the mind space, I guess, that the Rangers might be better off bringing in a veteran defenseman on a short-term deal, somebody that can hold things down, in the immediate near term. And I think Ryan McDonagh could be that guy. The unfortunate thing there is that you would have to trade for him, and that would mean you'd have to give up assets, whereas somebody like Orlov, who is a UFA after this season, maybe he can be had as a free agent for, cheaper, and you wouldn't have to give up as much. You wouldn't have to give up anything to get him. You would just have to sign him in free agency. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of different ways this could go, but I do like the idea, whether it's McDonagh or anybody else, of bringing a veteran, steady defenseman, because the Rangers did not have much steadiness when it comes to their blue line this past season. So, the idea is certainly on the table. And I mentioned this a second ago, but to elaborate on it, if the Rangers were to acquire McDonagh and he's only got the 1 year left on his deal, they could still spend big next offseason because you're not overcommitting. You've got next offseason. If you were to bring in Ryan McDonagh and his $6.75 million contract, that would expire after this season ends. So too would Artemi Panarin's contract. He's at $11.64 million. Susie, if he's even still here by then, his contract will come off the books. That's another $3.25 million in spending money for the Rangers next offseason. And Kreider, I mean, he might get traded this offseason, but whether it happens now or next offseason, you'll be out from under a contract that for the next 2 years was going to pay Kreider $6.5 million. So you're opening up a lot of salary cap space for next offseason. There's obviously a lot the Rangers could do with that. And, again, acquiring Ryan McDonagh does not prevent you from doing any of that. And in fact, if you want kind of like a part two of this, if you were to acquire Ryan McDonagh, it's possible if he plays well this season, and this is a little risky because he'll be getting into his late 30s at this point, but you could extend him at some point for quite a bit less money, presumably, than he's currently making. Ryan McDonagh on his next contract is not going to make $6.75 million per season, but if you reacquire him now and he does well this season, he wants to stay. I mean, maybe he'd love being back in New York with the Rangers, and he'd relish this chance to try to turn the team around. I mean, he's already won 2 Stanley Cups, right? So this is the last thing to do. Come back to New York and win one here, right? I mean, why not? I love how I'm just kind of laying out Ryan McDonagh's career plans for him, but that would be a lot of fun. There's no doubt about that. So yeah, I mean, that's, kind of a long way of saying that you wouldn't be overcommitting to Ryan McDonagh. Whereas if you sign somebody like Provorov, Gavrikov, yeah, you're going to be shelling out big time money and a lot of years as well. A couple more ideas here, a couple more reasons why it could make some sense to bring back Ryan McDonagh. Important penalty killer. He was on Tampa Bay's top penalty kill unit this past season. Tampa had the sixth best penalty kill in the league at 81.6%. I'm sure having Vasilevsky in net probably helps there, but it's still a really good penalty kill. And obviously McDonagh played a big role in said penalty kill. The Rangers this past season, they could actually use more help on the penalty kill than you might realize, because when you look at it on the surface, it doesn't really look that bad. The Rangers this past season were number 11 in the league in the PK at 80.3%. And again, that sounds pretty solid, but they really struggled down the stretch this season. Like the last month or two, I mean, the power play was brutal, and that kind of got all the headlines on this podcast and in other places as well. But their penalty kill really fell apart too. And I think maybe having somebody like Ryan McDonagh, he could bolster that unit as well. On top of everything else, I mean, look, he's still a heck of a hockey player. Played all 82 games last season. He was a plus 43, the top plus minus of any player in the NHL. Tremendously impressive at the age of 35. He was always in a prominent role with Tampa, always in their top four. He averaged 20 minutes, 22 seconds of time on the ice per night. This is actually his lowest time on the ice since his rookie season in 2010-2011, but it was second on Tampa Bay in time on the ice among defensemen, only to Victor Hedman. So that's still very impressive as well. And one more reason I got to throw out there right now before we eventually shift gears here and come to a final decision and a verdict. You could have somebody who, at least for the short term, certainly not for the long term. It can only last for so long because, McDonagh, like I said, he's going to be 36 next month. But for the short term, at least, you might have somebody that could be an ideal defense partner with Adam Fox. We've kind of been looking for that. Who's going to be the dude that's with Adam Fox? Who's going to be the guy that's joined at the hip with Adam Fox? For a while, it was Ryan Lindgren, and that worked until it didn't. It worked basically until this past season when, Lindgren had that injury in the preseason, seemed to have been rushed back into the lineup, was never really himself, never really got his season off the ground when he was with the Rangers, and then, of course, ultimately traded to the Colorado Avalanche due to the Rangers being bad at hockey this past season and unable to contend and having to sell rather than buy. But, who's going to be Fox's defense partner next season? I mean, right now, I think if K'Andre Miller is back, you're probably looking at him. If Miller's not back, I mean, Susie? Like who would it even be? It would have to be somebody you would think on the left side. I don't know that there's an obvious answer. And Ryan McDonagh would not be a long-term answer, but he'd be a short-term answer. You could at least, get the ball rolling there. You could give him a defense partner for a couple of years and then maybe go with, somebody else, one of the young guys that's coming along. We'll see. But if Ryan McDonagh were to be reacquired by the Rangers, very decent chance, I think, that he's out there with Adam Fox on opening night for this upcoming season. Nothing for sure, nothing set in stone, but I think there's a good chance that would happen. So in just a second, I'm going to keep everything rolling, going to come to a final decision, a verdict on whether or not I personally think this is a good idea, whether the Rangers should look to make it happen this offseason, and, just kind of share my thoughts on that. We'll do that in just a second. All right, let's go keep everything rolling here on Locked On New York Rangers. Click the wrong button there. The wrong video played. That was the end of the episode video for those of you watching on YouTube. But that's okay. We keep everything rolling right now. Like I said, it's time to come to a verdict as far as Ryan McDonagh is concerned. And do I think the Rangers could, should, and will pursue him in the trade market this offseason? Like I was mentioning earlier, it is somewhat viable just to the very simple fact that Ryan McDonagh is on a one-year contract. So you're not really overextending yourself. I mean, in a way you are, because he's making so much this year, close to $7 million. But one other aspect I have to mention that I like here when it comes to a defenseman on a one-year deal, or maybe a two-year deal if the Rangers were to go out and sign a defenseman in free agency, is that I mentioned the term earlier, stopgap defenseman. I didn't elaborate on that as much as I should have. Part of what I mean by that is the Rangers do have a couple of young defensemen coming along that they really like. They've yet to play professional hockey. They're both still at the college level, but that would be Drew Fortescue and EJ Emery. Fortescue was a former third-round pick in 2013. He's played at BC the last 2 seasons, and then you've got Emery, a former first rounder at number 30 overall in 2024. Both still very young, both still on the way, but the Rangers have high hopes for both of them. I do too. I mean, you never know for sure, right? You never know which draft picks are going to definitely hit. You never know which ones are definitely going to miss, but the Rangers are high on both those guys. Fortescue in particular, I think has showed really well for himself at BC the last couple of seasons here. People seem to think that, he'll hold it down as an NHL defenseman. And Emery, similar things can be said. He's over at North Dakota right now. But, former first rounder, nothing to sneeze at either. I don't know that Emery has like a massively high ceiling, but again, people seem to believe that he's going to be a big time NHL contributor whenever he gets here. So that being the case, I like the idea of a veteran defenseman that can hold things down until one or both of those two are ready. The other thing, I got to throw this out here. I mean, look, we're all human, right? There's a human aspect to all of this. You try to take emotions out of it as best as you can and just try to be as objective as you possibly can. But, I mean, who among Ranger fans did not like Ryan McDonagh when he was here? That was the kind of guy that was going to play New York Ranger hockey. We mentioned his leadership traits earlier. He was going to go out there and go to battle every single night. He wasn't going to take games off. I think a lot of us certainly really were big fans of Ryan McDonagh when he was here. It's funny because in recent seasons, there's been all these debates about who should be the next Ranger captain. When Ryan McDonagh was named the next Ranger captain, it was kind of just like, yeah, that sounds about right. I don't think anybody really had a problem with it. I mean, maybe there was like another player that you'd have preferred more, but I don't think anybody really like batted an eye at it. It was just kind of the natural order of things. I don't think they would make him the captain if they were to reacquire him, but I could see him wearing a letter next season for sure, especially when you consider the way the Rangers, they dole out those letters, those alternate captaincies like Halloween candy. But bottom line, a lot of Ranger fans, myself included, look back very fondly on that era of Ranger hockey and on Ryan McDonagh specifically. And it would just be a case of everything coming full circle. And there is certainly some fun to be had with that, just the idea of Ryan McDonagh coming back. But here's where I break everybody's hearts. If you're, really pro bringing back Ryan McDonagh, I can't bring him back just for the feels, quote unquote, right? Like it's got to make sense. And I just don't know that it makes enough of it. There are reasons, we just laid them out in the last section, where you could talk yourself into potentially bringing back Ryan McDonagh. And the Rangers have certainly done worse things than the idea of, reacquiring a former captain and somebody that could provide some leadership and some hard-nosed blue-collar hockey. But I can't get on board with this because, first of all, the limited cap space. They've got precious little money to work with this offseason. And if you bring back Ryan McDonagh, $6.75 million per season, that's basically all of it right there. There's not really a whole lot else you can do after that happens. And I just don't know that that's the best use of the limited funds that you have. You've also got the fact that, and I laid this out earlier, but I mean, this is a very simple case of facts being facts. He turns 36 next month. And anytime you get a player that's starting to get up there in years a little bit, there's certainly a decent amount of risk when it comes to, putting them in a prominent role. And when is the clock going to strike midnight for Ryan McDonagh? I don't know. I mean, he's still a heck of a player, but you just never know when that can happen, when a player can decline sharply. And Ryan McDonagh is no exception to that rule. I mean, not saying that he's like a prime candidate for it, but it could happen, given the physical toll that he's taken over all the years. You've also got the fact that I didn't even really talk about this yet, but the fact that the Rangers would have to give up something to get Ryan McDonagh. Now, what is the going rate for 1 year of Ryan McDonagh at $6.75 million? I talked about maybe doing some kind of a package around Carson Soucy. If Tampa Bay feels they need the cap space and they would move on from McDonagh to take Soucy, that's at least possible. But the bottom line is you'd be giving up something. Like if it didn't involve Soucy, if you were to just bring back Ryan McDonagh in exchange for like draft picks, I mean, you're probably talking about a second round draft pick. And, on one hand, maybe teams occasionally do overvalue their draft picks because you never know for sure if the draft pick is going to work out or not. But at the same time, that's another second round draft pick. I mean, the Rangers are constantly trading those away. Do they even have any to trade at this point? So it would take a lot to get him. And there's a decent chance where if you look at free agency, there's probably another veteran defenseman that you could very simply just sign in free agency and you wouldn't have to give up any draft pick. I said something very similar last offseason when the Rangers traded for Riley Smith and they give a second rounder to the Penguins for him. Whoops, that didn't work out very well. Never understood, slight tangent here, but I never understood the Rangers' obsession with Riley Smith, especially when, again, you could have just found a veteran winger in free agency and not had to give away a second round draft pick to your division rival. So that didn't make any sense. And it's kind of a similar situation here. I don't know about giving away a second-round pick, like I said, for just one season of Ryan McDonagh. But I will do this to keep hope alive for everybody that's really all about this and really would like to see Ryan McDonagh back. I present to you an alternative. And this one comes with risk as well. So fair warning for the people that don't want Ryan McDonagh to come back. How about this? Wait until this next season ends. See how everything goes. Are the Rangers back in contention? Do they buy at the trade deadline? Do they sell at the trade deadline? Is everything coming back together? How does everything look? How do the Ranger defensemen fare for this upcoming season, right? And then you reassess at the end of next season. Because at that point, and this goes back to what I was talking about just a second ago, Ryan McDonagh is a free agent. You don't have to give up anything in a trade if you want to bring him back. Now, depending on how he does this season, what his market is, you'll have to fend off other teams looking to sign him in free agency. But you can work with that. I mean, you can, with Ryan McDonagh, tell him, look, man, you've won your Stanley Cups. You've made all your money. Awesome stuff. Maybe we can't afford to give you as big of a contract as some other teams would. But, man, you got a chance to come back home, come back to New York, at least one more season here, try to win a Stanley Cup. I think that would be somewhat appealing to Ryan McDonagh. Now, I mentioned the risk, and the risk is that at that point, he's really going to be starting to get up there. Because, like I said, he turns 36 next month. That would mean going into next season, he would be 37 years old. Doesn't mean he can't play good hockey. We've seen plenty of players in this league play well at that age and quite a bit older as well. But there is a certain amount of risk that comes with that. It's an idea. But if you're the Rangers, only do that if you can afford it. I would only want the Rangers to look to bring Ryan McDonagh back in free agency next offseason if they have nothing else to do with that money, or they spend the money that they need to spend on this guy, on that guy, their own free agents from around the league, and they say, hey, we got just enough to sign Ryan McDonagh for a one-year contract. I'd be cool with that. I think that could be a lot of fun, and like I said, there are certain things to like about McDonagh and what he brings to the table. I just, right now, can't make a lot of sense out of trading for him, given, again, the salary cap problems, whatever you would have to give up to Tampa Bay, the amount of players the Rangers would have to clear out to make room for Ryan McDonagh. Doesn't really make a lot of sense to me, but I'd be very curious to hear what you guys think about this. If you have an opinion one way or the other, go ahead and leave it in the comment section. Very curious to see how this one's going to turn out. I feel like most Ranger fans are probably against it, but not overwhelmingly so. I think we're talking maybe like 55, 45%, maybe 60, 40, somewhere in that ballpark. I'm very curious to hear your guys' thoughts on it, though, for sure. We'll call it there. If you guys would like to get in touch with this podcast, please send an email to lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Once again, that is lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Definitely give us a follow on Twitter as well, @jchick17. Once again, that is @jchick17. And definitely subscribe to Locked On New York Rangers YouTube channel. Thanks again, guys, and we'll see you next time.